वृंदावन संचारी,
भज मन वृंदावन संचारी,
मन वृंदावन संचारी,
भज मन राधे राधे राधे
वृंदावन
गोविंदा,
मन राधे 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 गोविंदा,
भज मन राधे 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 गोविंदा,
मन राधे 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 गोविंदा,
भज मन राधे 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 गोविंदा,
मन राधे 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 गोविंदा,
भज मन यमुना तीर विहारी,
मन यमुना तीर विहारी,
भज मन यमुना तीर विहारी,
मन यमुना तीर विहारी,
भज मन राधा चेतोहारी,
मन राधा चेतोहारी,
भज मन राधा चेतोहारी,
मन राधा चेतोहारी,
भज मन राधे 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 गोविंदा,
मन राधे 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 गोविंदा,
भज मन राधे 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 गोविंदा,
मन राधे 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 गोविंदा,
भज मन राधे गोविंदा,
मन राधे गोविंदा,
भज मन गोवर्धन गिरिधारी,
मन गोवर्धन गिरिधारी,
भज मन वृंदावन संचारी,
मन वृंदावन संचारी,
भज मन यमुना तीर विहारी,
मन यमुना तीर विहारी,
भज मन राधा चेतोहारी,
मन राधा चेतोहारी,
भज मन राधे 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 गोविंदा,
मन राधे 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 गोविंदा,
भज मन राधे 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 गोविंदा,
मन राधे 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 गोविंदा,
भज मन राधे गोविंदा,
मन राधे गोविंदा,
भज मन राधे गोविंदा,
मन राधे गोविंदा,
भज मन राधे गोविंदा। बोलिए राधावर कृष्ण चंद्र भगवान की जय, सद्गुरुनाथ महाराज की जय। श्री कृष्ण शरणं मम, 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 श्री कृष्ण शरणं मम,
श्री कृष्ण शरणं मम,
श्री कृष्ण शरणं मम,
श्री कृष्ण शरणं मम,
श्री कृष्ण शरणं मम,
श्री कृष्ण शरणं मम,
श्री कृष्ण शरणं मम,
श्री कृष्ण शरणं मम,
श्री कृष्ण शरणं मम,
श्री कृष्ण शरणं मम,
श्री कृष्ण शरणं मम,
श्री कृष्ण शरणं मम,
श्री कृष्ण शरणं मम,
श्री कृष्ण
शरणं मम
श्रीकृष्ण शरणं मम
श्रीकृष्ण शरणं मम
श्रीकृष्ण शरणं मम
श्रीकृष्ण शरणं मम शरणं मम शरणं मम शरणं मम शरणं मम शरणं मम बोलिए श्री कृष्णचंद्र भगवान की
जय।
सद्गुरुनाथ महाराज की
जय।
हरे राम 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 सीता राम 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 हरे राम 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 सीता राम 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 हरे राम 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 सीता राम राम राम
हरे राम 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 सीता राम राम राम
हरे राम 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 सीता राम राम राम
हरे राम 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 सीता राम राम राम
हरे राम 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 सीता राम राम राम
हरे राम 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 सीता राम राम राम
हरे राम 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 सीता राम राम राम
हरे राम 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 सीता राम राम राम
हरे राम 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 सीता राम राम राम
हरे राम 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 सीता राम राम राम
हरे राम 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 सीता राम राम राम
हरे राम 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 सीता राम राम राम
Hari Om everyone. Can you all hear me and see me clearly? Awesome. We will begin with the invocation and then proceed with today's ātmabodha. Hari Chaitanya will lead us with the invocation and the next two shlokas. I will follow him for those two shlokas. And then Brahmacharini Divya will give us the full intro of those two shlokas, then Hari, then I will sum it up at the end. So let us begin with the invocation. सहनाववतु सहनौ भुनक्तु सह वीर्यङ्करवावहै तेजस्विनावधीतमस्तु मा विद्विषावहै ॐ शान्तिः 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 गुरुर्ब्रह्मा गुरुर्विष्णुः गुरुर्देवो महेश्वरः गुरुरेव परं ब्रह्म तस्मै श्री गुरवे नमः तस्मै श्री गुरवे नमः हरि ओम हरि
तपोभिक्षीणपापानां शान्तानां वीतरागिणां मुमुक्षूणामपेक्ष्योऽयम् आत्मबोधो विधीयते. 27 and 28. रज्जुसर्पवदात्मानं
रज्जुसर्पवदात्मानम्
जीवं ज्ञात्वा भयं वहेत्
जीवं ज्ञात्वा भयं वहेत्
नाहं जीवः परात्मेति
नाहं जीवः परात्मेति
ज्ञातश्चेन्निर्भयो भवेत्
ज्ञातं चेन्निर्भयो भवेत्
ātmāvabhāsayatyekah
ātmāvabhāsayatyekah
buddhyādīnīndriyāṇyapi
buddhyādīnīndriyāṇyapi
dīpo ghaṭādivatsvātmā
dīpo ghaṭādivatsvātmā
jaḍaistairnāvabhāsyate.
jaḍaistairnāvabhāsyate. Thank you, Hari. Go ahead.
Can you hear me? Okay. So in this, this is verse 27. So bhayaṃ vahet jñātvā ātmānaṃ jīvaṃ rajjusarpavat. So we'll start with the analogy first. Rajjusarpavat, just as the rope and snake, bhayaṃ vahet, we're overcome with fear. So this is one of the most classic examples in Advaita-Vedanta, the rope and snake, rope and snake, rope and snake. So what is this all about? Rope and snake is that we, in the dim light, we misunderstand the rope to be the snake. So in that room, the rope happened to touch my leg, and instead I say, oh my gosh, I've been bitten by a snake, right? The idea has thoroughly invested itself deep in our mind, and that sensation that comes afterwards is nothing but bhayaṃ. It ripples through our body, and it is for sure a snake that has bitten my leg, and now I'm going to be poisoned, and I don't have very long to live. Somebody take me to the hospital. All of that starts coming out. But what is the truth? It is just that it was the rope that brushed my ankle without me knowing. So in the very same way, that small, seemingly funny, non-coincidental mistake that we make can lead to such a huge ripple effect in the experience of bhayaṃ. So here it is, in the darkness of ignorance, my true nature is misunderstood as being the jīvaṃ. Because I take myself to be this individual ego, that one entity with limits, I naturally am overcome with bhaya. I start crying. Oh my gosh, I'm a samsari. Oh my gosh, all I feel is pain. Yes, there are drips of honey of happiness, but it never lasts. This whole life always has pain. And the worst pain, the worst fear is death itself. Why? Because I see myself as the jiva, the perceiver, the feeler, the thinker that is riddled, that is trying to constantly swim in samsara with all of its ups and downs, swings and back and forth. Now this Vairagya Shatkam has a really good list that really, makes us think about how does this fear manifest, right? When we're enjoying good health, we fear disease. If we have good social status, we fear of falling from that status. And this one was a funny one. When we have wealth, there is fear of a hostile king. It's like, okay, does that mean taxation? Does that mean, our wealth is taken, the stimulus package doesn't come to us anymore, right? So when we have wealth, fear of tax evasion becomes a big thing. Honor, we fear humiliation. When we have power, we fear foes. When there's beauty, we fear old age. If we're scripturally erudite, right? Very knowledgeable, very proud of the degrees that we have on our wall, our fear is opponents. And it immediately reminded me that the final exam to get your PhD is a dissertation where you have to defend your thesis in front of a panel of opponents. Very clearly the description of how fear manifests in intellectual heights. If you have virtues, the fear of someone creating slander, the slanderers, right? If they could call me something that I'm not, I'm a virtuous person, how could you call me that? When, of course, we have our body, there's the fear of death, that ultimate one at the very end. And in this particular verse, it ends with, everything in this world pertaining to men is attained with fear. Renunciation alone leads to fearlessness, right? So we can say that, even our Shastras list, Sama, Dana, Veda, Danda, the world works with fear and the Danda. How can you say fearlessness is what we have to aim for? Yes, as long as I take myself to be the jiva that is swimming in samsara, bhaya and danda are very much the clear motivators that will work effectively. But how long do I want to swim? How long do I want to be motivated by fear? If I want out, I need that cennirbhayatvam. And where does that come from? Nirbhayaha bhavet chet jñātā iti nāhaṃ jīvaḥ parātmeti. So we have to declare, nāhaṃ jīva, I am not the jiva, I am not the jiva, I am not the jiva. Aham parātmeti. I am thus paramatma. I am that one without a second. I am that one infinite. If I'm one without a second, how can there be an other to cause fear onto me? So I have to be awakened to this state. It is not a serpent, it is just a rope, right? And so having this good understanding, and what is this knowing, right? Is it just like, okay, yes, our rishis have told us for thousands upon years, tattvamasi, tattvamasi, great, I know that statement. My proof is, has that abhayam come into my experience? Is it true direct knowledge that I am not a jiva, I am paramatma? Is it a direct experience? Again, going back to that snake and rope example, if my family member comes and tells me it's just a rope, it's just a rope, until I come to get myself out of that paralyzed state, go near that thing, start playing with that thing itself and realizing, okay, it's not the texture of snake, it has no scales, there's no fangs, I can't find the head, I can't find the tail, this is a rope, this is a rope, this is a rope. When I come to truly believe that this is a rope, then I say, okay, I'm fine. There's nothing to fear. In the same way, I have to sit in contemplation saying, I am not the jiva, I am not the BMI, I'm not the perceiver, I'm not the feeler, I'm not the thinker. I am that which exists beyond all of this. What is that? Let me come to truly experience it for myself, even though the rishis have told me 1,000 times. Only then will I gain that true abhaya. And Gurudev had the funniest explanation in terms of adding that bhakti rasa. I cracked up for 5 minutes just watching that analogy. He said, why do you think Bhagavan Shiva has all of that rope around him? He's trying to pull you out of samsara. You're like, what rope? All I see is snake. Well, what can I do? You see the snake, he has a rope. Bhagavan Shiva wants to bring you out of samsara with the rope. I thought it was hilarious. It's worth watching, seeing Gurudev really deliver that joke well. So moving on to the next verse, it's saying, just as the lamp illumines the pots, etc., so also the Atman illumines the buddhi, the organs, and etc. So ekaha dīpaha avabhāsyate avabhāsayati ghaṭādivatsvātmā ekaha atma avabhāsayati indriyāṇi buddhyādīnīndriyāṇyapi. So it is saying here that that light of consciousness is the one that illumines everything, and there's only one, eka. One illumines all the buckets with all the different bodies. It has all the different thoughts of the mind. It has all the different moods and conditions of, it has the thoughts of the buddhi and the conditions and moods of the mind. All of these are illumined by that one consciousness illuminator. So the example given is that lamp is one light that has a capacity to illumine all the pots that are in that room. So this is an important verse when we ask the question, how come I'm not able to see God? Why am I not able to see God? It is the consciousness that makes the body seen, that activates the mind and the intellect. But the body cannot see God, the mind cannot feel God, and the intellect cannot think of God. The dreamer cannot see the waker, the dreamer's mind cannot feel the waker, and the dreamer's intellect cannot understand the waker. Because all of these equipments are jada, they're insentient. So the Atma cannot be understood using these equipments. It is that which is self-illuminating. So the previous verse tells us to know our true nature. And this verse warns us that knowing is not with the equipment. It is in the next verse that we can ask, okay, then can you tell me about what is this knowing that you're talking about? How can you actually know? That's given in more detail in the next verse. So with that, Swamiji, I'm done.
Hari Om. So as we see in these two shlokas, concepts that were revealed to us early on in ātmabodha, the self-lumosity of Atma, these instruments of mind being jada, all of that comes up again, and we see the implications of misapprehending what was given before, of not understanding the implications of the siddhantas that were clearly laid out earlier in the text. So if we start here in the 27th shloka, ātmānaṃ jīvaṃ jñātvā bhayaṃ vahet, that because I consider myself as this individual with this ahankara, the jiva, I'm overcome with fear. Now this fear is given after we understand the reason behind the fear arising even. Where first it's non-apprehension of the self, following that is the misapprehension that this gross body, this mind, and so on, this is me. And that's what begets fear. Because if we really analyze it, what is the origin of fear? How does it function? What's the effect of it? The origin of fear is seeing something as different from myself. If something is unknown to me and that's fearful, that however will my next vacation go, how will my health be tomorrow? All of these are fears of something that is upcoming, something that can go wrong. There's a possibility of it. I'm seeing all this as different from me, that I am this finite individual controlling as much as I can. That control I don't have over things is everything beyond me. Therefore, that fear sets in. Then the nature of that fear is being finite and limited then. I think this into existence, constantly thinking to myself, I am limited, I can't do these things, therefore things will go wrong. That fear only persists. And what's the effect of this then? I can never get over this non-apprehension and this misapprehension. They will always plague my personality as long as this fear exists. Then we go on to see in the same shloka, nāhaṃ jīvaḥ
parātmeti, that I'm not this jiva yet, but I'm that supreme self. Now, to even understand this statement fully, what it's even saying, I have to understand what fearlessness is then, the opposite of fear. That iti jñātah cennirbhayo bhavet, that having understood this, I become fearless. So what is the origin, nature, and effect of fearlessness then? The origin of fearlessness is taking refuge in something that exists. There's the story of the man who was climbing a mountain in the dark, for instance, and it was dusk time, trying to get to the top before it gets dark. He slips. And at a certain point, it's too dark to see below him, so he's holding on to two branches as tightly as he can. If he lets go, he's sure he's going to tumble all the way down. Injury, death, all these things are possible. So all night long, without sleeping, he tightly holds onto these branches. In the morning, finally, daylight breaks, the sun rises above the horizon, above the mountains, and he sees he was actually about 6 inches off the ground the whole time. If he had just let go, he would have been fine. But that fear set in because he didn't know whether that ground there exists or not was in question. He didn't think there's a ground existing there. Therefore, that fear set in and he could not be comfortable. In the same way, then, the non-apprehension that I have is scriptures talk about this Brahman. They say there's this reality. Everything comes from it, goes back into it. That's the only reality. That's what I hear. Do I really believe it, though? If I have non-apprehension, then I'm not believing it. And my pramana buddhi, all the buddhi that I have of what is real, goes into these inner equipments that I function through. So the origin of fearlessness is taking refuge in something that exists. And according to Vedanta, then, the difference between what exists and not exists, the difference between what is real and not real, clearly laid out from our ātmabodha time, seeing that that supreme reality is the only thing that is existent because it persists at all times, in all situations, without any modification or any kind of change. Now, what is the nature of fearlessness? It's where on this knowledge that everything is this Brahman, everything is supported by it, the person does not see anything else, does not hear anything else, does not know anything else. Now, this doesn't mean they're like the monkey emojis that we see. This simply means that all the other happenings in the world, all the other fleeting experiences, that person sees them for what they are, that they are impermanent, that they have no real bearing on what my true nature is. Like that boat in the middle of the ocean. There could be so much going on, but if it's anchored tightly, correctly, that doesn't move. That nishtha is what keeps it so firm. Now, the effect of this fearlessness then is not seeing differences. That in the multitude of variety that I see around in the world meaning everything from this ahankara down, even though they're going through so many modifications, I don't see all these differences going on and get tossed with every single one that happens. That fearlessness arises from understanding there is one ashraya, one support, and that is my refuge then. Now, in a moment of great despair, it's hard to conjure up this knowledge and have it come to my mind, which is why the example is so poignant, that if you think something is a snake right there, my first thought is not to say, oh, I learned in class that this could be a rope. Let me get closer to it and see if it's a rope. Better thing to do is to investigate from a distance then, just so if it does turn out to be a snake, that we don't get bit because of that. Meaning then that even in life, when there are things that conjure up fear in us, whether it's what happens to our loved ones, what happens to ourselves, we made a certain investment of time, money, resources in some kind of scheme, seeing how that goes. These are all causes of fear that we have. And because of that fear, that can lead to problems in our own equipment, the mental fatigue that comes from worrying about something, the toll that it takes on us physically. All of this is there simply because what is our priority? What are we looking to as growth? That gets completely veiled. That's non-apprehension, and the misapprehension of following those things that should not be followed. In the next shloka, we see an idea that was introduced earlier on in the text, comes up again here, that ekaha ātmabodha buddhyādīnīndriyāṇyapi, that atma illuminates the inner instrument, the sense organs, and so on, everything else. Really to show that what can I again rest on as my ashraya? And the example given is ghaṭādivatsvātmā, just as a lamp illuminates a pot. No matter how ornate or basic a pot is, without light, I don't know what it looks like. It can be one of those cheap ceramic pots, the ones we make for our moms for Mother's Day at school, where, you know, they'll have them at their work desk or somewhere, but really to use that thing would be awful because everything would spill out of it. It would break apart right away, right? There's no functionality to it. From a pot like that, too, there are priceless vases. I went to a museum one time and there's more security for that vase than there is for any world leader because that thing is priceless. There's no repair shop you can go to for it. These two disparities that we find in those two figures, the light is the only thing that even illumines it. Without that, we don't know its value. Also, then, when it comes to my equipment, no matter how dull the mind is, where I have a mind that is dull, that does not have any curiosity in it, intellectual capability is also low, I can have that kind of a mind. Or even a mind that is dynamic, subtle, capable of robust thinking, of great decision-making, dynamic living, all of that. Without this Atma, they're both inert. They both have the same amount of power then. Meaning we get so lost, connecting it back to fear, we get so lost to all the divisions that are there that we see. Meaning all these different kinds of pots, all these different kinds of equipments in this Ahankara assemblage. Whereas the only real distinction that we need to understand is, and focus on, what is real, what is unreal, and in this instance, what is the illuminator, what is illuminated? Because the more I go down this rabbit hole of finding differences and valuing things based on these differences, fear sets in, and also my focus goes away from what should be focused on, and ghaṭādivatsvātmā, that earthen pot, something that's so basic, something that is at the grossest level, that's all this pinda is. I glorify it so much because my intellect has some flashes of brilliance once every year, for instance, but that can't be the impetus for me to think that this is the be-all, end-all, that chasing the glory of this intellect is the purpose of my life. Because I've done that for so many lifetimes, that's why I'm born again in this lifetime. So understanding that maturity is what these two shlokas set us up for going forward. That's all I have, Swamiji.
Thank you, Hari. We come to this important aspect of the earlier examples that have been given to set us on this path to understand that which is my true nature. All the earlier examples are pointing towards this one truth. In spite of all the pointers given, even while listening to all the pointers, I am constantly in the abhyasa of considering that which is this jada, mana, buddhi, chitta, as deha also included, as my nature, as me. That is the abhyasa. It's about 6:30 right now. So in another hour or so, antaha gudagudayate, inside the Madhya Pradesh, there will be hunger. In fact, as soon as this class is done, many of you mothers, you'll have to rush. The half of your cooking is already on the stove or on the IP or whatever. As soon as this is done, that is reality, and that is what has to be, that cannot be neglected. So the abhyasa that happens constantly, abhyasa that happens, practice, the rigors of practice that happens is constantly to care for this body, mind and intellect aggressively. It's not a passive thing, it's a very aggressive thing. And when it is said that Atma tarhi kaha, what is Atma or Vivekaha kaha, there Adi Shankaracharya ji very vehemently says, very forcefully he says, Atma vastu tu ekam brahma, tad vyatiriktam sarvam anityam. Everything is anitya. But for us, that which is being constantly told or pointed as anitya is a reality. We don't want to give it up. Now, for somebody who has been seeing how real or how impactful, I remember a anecdote that Puja Gurudev would often repeat is there was this fellow, Bhaiya Totaram, his name, and right since very young, he had this psychological wrong thinking that he is a kida, a worm, that he would darken his room, not for any video, audio kind of a studio. He would darken his room, lest there would be some kind of a bird or some kind of a predator that comes and eats him up, that he wouldn't even step outside. They found this psychologist who looked very promising. So they somehow managed to take him to that psychologist, and the psychologist had his own game. They said, you'll have to leave as an inpatient, and I think I can treat. So for about a month or so, this fellow would be shown different kinds of worms on display, and he would sit in front of the mirror and he would repeat, these are the worms, I don't look like any of them, I am Totaram. These are the worms, I don't look like any one of them, I am Totaram. So after a month, he was bold. He used to walk in the corridor without any kind of support. He would go for lunch, breakfast, dinners all by himself. He would have his windows and he would, see through the windows, and whenever he saw a bird flying or a predator walking across, cats and dogs, so he would repeat to himself, I am Totaram. I am not like those worms. I am Totaram. I am not like those worms. I look entirely different. I am not a worm. So after a month, his parents and they came and they were happy to see him look so confident. When even one small thought, it can weigh you down. So once that they saw there was a brilliant guy there, Totaram was shining. So they said, let's go home. 15 minutes they were walking. He didn't want to take a auto or a taxi because he said, "मैं Totaram हूँ मैं. I am Totaram." And that was the fastest sprint of about a mile that he ran back into the psychologist's office, and there was a patient. He just barged in and he said, everything is fine. I understand that I am Totaram. I am not the worm. Do the birds know it? The moment he says, do the birds know it? His repeating like a parrot, it didn't help. For most of us, Vedanta is like that parroting. Atma Brahma Vastu tu ekam tad vyatiriktam anyat sarvam anityam. Memorized. I can repeat entire Tattvabodha, entire ātmabodha, entire Vivek Chudamani, Bhaja Govindam, Sadhana Panchakam, fingertips. I've learned Bhagavad Gita also. Adi Shankaracharya ji asks, Tatah kim, Tatah kim, Tatah kim. Good, you have memorized. does it translate into being an experience? In these two shlokas, it says, rajjusarpavadātmānaṃ. This first thing that has to be understood, this is not an example of rope and a snake. It is the snake on the rope. Because both of them cannot exist together. If there is snake, there is no rope. If there is rope, there cannot be a snake. I don't know, Swamiji. I'm throwing light here. Okay. This part, which is visible right now, I can see very clearly is rope. But that which is under the bushes, maybe that is still a snake. Ho sakta hai na? It can be a possibility, right? Maybe. I don't know. It can be, right? No. Therefore, as an extension, we may have been spending years in the path of Adhyatma, spirituality, with Vedanta. We may have studied a lot of scriptures. That doesn't qualify to make senior sadhak. पहुंचे हुए साधक है. I have just started, no, there is no such gradations. Either you are there, either you are wise, or you are in the big boat called otherwise. There is no in-between percentages. The snake cannot exist in percentages. As soon as there is that light shines upon that which is confusing my mind, I see the rope, that bhaya is gone. Similarly, as long as this jiva considers oneself as the limited existence, buddhi grasps it, logically understands it, but it does not turn this data into wisdom. Now, where do we fail? Where do we lack? Because when we compare it to the other fields of knowledge, vyavaharika knowledge, something is shown, pointed, experimented. I have the knowledge. And I function with that knowledge wherever it has to be applied. If I'm going into a new kitchen, especially here in this country where both salt and sugar look exactly the same. Your earlier experience, your earlier dealing with it, you have known that you cannot blindly put whatever. Take a few grains. Good that I tasted it. This is not sugar. Then you will check again. Make sure that also is tasted, because sometimes there can be two different bottles of same thing. Now this is sugar. Now how did you know to make this evaluation? Because of your earlier past experience, isn't it? We put that wisdom into practice. But here what happens is, there is a vast majority of us who anticipate some miracles. आएगा 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 आने वाला. Suddenly Bhagwan will appear and he will sprinkle just like how he did to Dhruva, and all my jadyam will be gone, and I will be uplifted. There will be a halo around my head. I will beaming forth. Wake up. Nahi suptasya simhasya pravishanti mukhe mृगाः. सोते हुए सिंह के मुंह में खरगोश भी नहीं घुसेगा. That lion which is lazily lying down, the deer will not come and say, "Oh dear lion, you are the king of the forest. Here I come to offer myself unto thee." No. There has to be some effort for that Dvaita to become Advaita. Similarly, here the effort, it is not in the realm of mysticism or mysterious and magical and miraculous. There's a lot that we lose on that front, in that asha. The second is our abhyasa may lack nityatva, like the repetitive constant vichara that is required. I see in several Devi groups where the Devi group members have to come and speak. In such groups, say they are doing Bhagavad Gita or Vivek Chudamani or whatever is the subject. When do they start preparing? The problem is not just with the children, even with the adults. When do they start prepping? The night before. There is another signal group or WhatsApp group or something where they are texting. Which shloka? Where is the meanings of this? Where can I find it? This is a confusing shloka where 9:30 night they're sitting down writing notes. See, the purpose of writing that notes and explaining that notes is not like a chore. It's not like a mechanical process wherein you do it for the sake of. It is so that through the week there is that atma vichara as a habit constantly included. That whatever is the outside work that you are engaged in, your buddhi has been uplifted, has risen above, and constantly pushing it to rise above. From where you can actually see. Before being the Sakshi from the standpoint of Atma Chaitanya, from the standpoint of true self, even to observe the rest of it from the buddhi. Buddhi has to be alert. And it is not just during puja, during japa. It is not just during puja, during japa, during some satsang and bhajan sankirtan. Every time that you are there in the vehicle, your buddhi should be alert. What is in that lane? Are they coming fast? What is behind me? Am I being, is there somebody on the tail? Who is on my right side? What generic direction am I following? What is the speed limit that I have to curtail myself to? There are a lot of factors and buddhi has to be alert. Initial driver might say, man, there's so many components, it is nerve-wracking. And that is why you go through the test. wherein everybody invariably fails at one test which is called parallel parking. So you have to do the parallel parking, and is it and then like this, or is it like this and then like this, and then straighten it, where it has to be just 6 inches away from, not closer than that, and not more than this, 8 inches or 9 inches. Within that range I have to park. Tension. But there comes a day, after few months of practice, you have a cup in your hand, you have a hand on the wheel, and you're shifting that cup into other hand and free wheeling and holding on to it, then changing, shifting. All while driving. It is not that you have come to a halt and then shifted from this hand to that hand. While driving, you're doing it. Abhyasa becomes stronger and stronger. At Sharira, Sukha Dukkha, or Shita Ushna. That is what we saw in the earlier 3 shlokas, right? At Sharira, it is Shita Ushna. At Mana, it is Sukha Dukkha. At Buddhi, Mana Avamana. How balanced, equipoised do we maintain? At a body level, when somebody says something, we get I keep digging a hole for myself when I say this. When somebody is deforested, what else will you call other than being bald? I'm sensitive. Don't call me that. And then we are taught you have to be politically right. A brown should not be called this, black should not be called this, white should not be called this, bald should not be called, thin should not be called, fat should not be. Seriously? That is where we go into sadhana as? Touchy feet, touch me not antakarana, where somebody smiles, doesn't smile, says hi, doesn't say hi, praises, doesn't praise. I feel. Constantly there is happening. I was insulted. I was left behind. That is the abhyasa that we are entertaining. Being the snake. My scales are important. How light glows on it is important. How slimy it is important. How slippery I can. And when we come to the satsang, then we hear, you are not the snake. I am not the snake. I am the rope. I am the rope. I am the rope. Aham roposmi. Aham roposmi. See, we hear one thing, and before it can translate into wisdom, our abhyasa is something else. Recognize those patterns and work on each one of those layers to be alert, awake, vigilant. Therefore, sadhana is not just for a classroom environment or a puja environment or a satsang environment. It is a 24/7, 365, all lifelong, continuous sadhana. To be in that balanced awareness. And that very balance is called yoga. Samatvam yoga uchyate, Bhagavad Gita. Why? What happens when you are in that? Nāhaṃ jīvaḥ parātmeti jñātaṃ cennirbhayo bhavet. And what is this Paramatma Tattva? This Paramatma Tattva is a Nitya Vastu. Nitya meaning that which perishes not. Satvastu, that which is of the nature of existential principle. The rest of it is the nature of perishing. Let it perish. Instead our focus is बाल उखड़ रहे हैं, बाल सफेद हो रहे हैं, बस बाल के खाल खींचते रहो जिंदगी भर. Our abhyasa has to reflect the jnana that we are aiming at. So if you are going towards Houston, your car has to be on I-45 South. If the car is constantly jumps across the railing and then goes on to I-45 North, and you say, drive to kar hi raha hu na? I am driving, you know. In which direction? It has to be in the direction of that which is being logically illumined and ascertained by our own buddhi. In that, what I experience is cennirbhayatvam, fearlessness. I'm not talking of fearlessness of a Bruce Lee or a Jet Li or a Idli. That there are 10-15 people and then I can bash up all of them. Or even better, our Bollywood, Tollywood, Collywood, Sandalwood, whatever you call them. Man, they're like physics laws don't work, don't apply on them. Laws of physics absolutely doesn't work on them. 100 people bashed. And still you are like, have a stamina, not a sweat rolling anywhere. You're fresh. Even hairstyle has not moved from here to there. No, that is not what we call here as fearlessness. The fearlessness is I am the one using it. That which is being used is perishable, and this perishable will have changes, and those changes should not bring in an impact of change in me. This knowledge and application, nitya and anitya, in practice has to be vigilantly applied. Then I have nothing to lose, to be fearful of. Now, all of these, that which today I consider myself as, does it have an independent existence, independent power, independent way of being all by itself? There is a story that all the organs, they had a round table conference, committee meeting. A committee meeting is where you spend hours to maintain minutes. So they had this committee meeting and everybody said, who is the bestest? I said, sarvendriyanam nayanam pradhanam. So each one had their own bragging points. So finally they decided, this story comes in the Upanishad, that, how about you leave the body and we will see how much it has impacted, and if we are being very, very cornered without your presence, then we will say you are the greatest. So one by one, eyes went for Kashi Yatra. Eyes came back and said, guys, did you miss me? Come, take your place. Why? The rest of them compensated. When the prana wanted to think of leaving, everybody started suffocating. Prana Shakti here, not the air. That which is giving the very source, from the source for this Prana Shakti, that Chetana, That is my nature. Because of whose presence buddhi ityadi indriyani, manaha chakshuhu ityadi indriyani, these indriyas, they function. Without that, they are useless, dead carcass. Or if you want to hear it in a very flowery way, it is good manure. But then our question in our buddhi is, but how will I know if I am that Atma? Because for everything that we interact with, our buddhi is the only way with which we have ascertained everything. The harder that the buddhi is trying to grasp, catch, hold on to it, it is slippery. It like nothing, you can't hold anything. How will my buddhi understand? See, when there is a dīpo, it illumines everything. Before it can illumine anything else, what does it illumine? It illumines its own presence. That it does not require an authentication by any other source to say that it exists. It's kind of raining thunderstorm right now. If I ask one of the brahmacharyans to go check if the sun is still out there, both of them are holding on to it. I still have to understand what this means, but anyways. And if one of them says, Swamiji, I need a powerful flashlight. Why? To search the sun. It is self-evident. You don't need another source to illuminate. Similarly, this Atma Chaitanya is self-revealing, self-evident, does not depend upon any other. But how will I know? Its very nature is to know. Its very nature is illumination. Its very nature is knowledge. The first time I did hand glide, it was in a tandem, so it was fine. The second and third time was different. So you are running, holding on to that little pole, and there is a kite-like thing, and you are running where? Running to jump off a cliff. Somewhere in deep in the heart, like, what if it takes a nosedive? You're seeing others also do it. But that fear is there still. After reaching to that point, you jump, you glide, you take off. But until you reach there, all the preparation is necessary. Which means every moment of our waking period has to be accounted for. How alert, how vigilant, how awakeful I have gone through the experience. The success and failure of life and its interactions with the outside world is not about how much you have accomplished or how much you have not accomplished. How awareful have I gone through the experience is the success of that interaction. From the Vedantic standpoint. Not from the capitalistic, not from the materialistic, not from the socialistic perspective. From the Vedantic perspective, how balancedly awareful I was during all the interaction. Na kinchidapi vichalayat. There is not even an iota of flinching inside. If you flinch, what does it show? Bhayaṃ kvachit asti. Somewhere there is still that fear. Somewhere I'm holding on to, somewhere I'm still clinging on to. That evaluation has to be consistently done without failing, without forgetting. So therefore, it is not a part-time job. Therefore, it is not a. Many people ask, out of lot of concern, Swamiji, when will you take a break, a vacation from all of this? You talk about the same thing again and again, same Bhagavad Gita, same ātmabodha, tattva-bodha, Vivek Chudamani. Do you get to take a break from all of this? It is like telling the prana shakti to take a break. No, there is no break from here. That commitment has to be there. That sincerity has to be there. That consistency has to be there. To live a life awareful. To live a life vigilant. To live a life in the complete awake state. Capitalistic or socialistic, or they talk about being woke. We talk about being awake. There's a huge difference. Woke about that which is anitya as a reality. Awake about this anitya is not to be engaged in or caught up in. It is to view it from that awareness. So we'll continue this next week. Yeah, perfect timing. We'll continue this next week on Tuesday, the 28th or 29th sloka, and we will delve deeper into the further aspects of it, about this svabodha, what that svabodha means. Until then, be safe. Let's conclude with Shanti Path. Om Sarve Bhavantu Sukhinah, Sarve Santu Niramayaः, Sarve Bhadrani Pashyantu, Ma Kaschid Dukkha Bhag Bhavet, Asato Ma Sadgamaya, Tamaso Ma Jyotirgamaya, Mrityor Ma Amritangamaya. Om Purnamadav Purnamidam Purnat Purnamudachyate, Purnasya Purnamadaya Purnamevavasishyate. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Harihi Om Shri Gurubhyo Namaha. Harihi